with the sweat lodge and started to work Native American path. And at a certain point, I kept having a vision of building an underground ceremonial chamber. And lady I'm working for says, "Oh, you're doing sweats? Oh, you should come meet Joseph. You know, he comes to town and teaches." So I went and saw him. There's a break, and people are talking, and these two guys are saying, one to the other, you know, his vision is that of people building peace chambers. And I think if someone doesn't build one, he's going to stop coming around. So I'm looking at him and I said, "Well, what's a peace chamber like?" And they start describing it. He says, "Oh, is that like a Kiva?" I said, "Oh, yeah, that's exactly his tradition." I'm going, shucks. Here's a guy going around trying to get people to build peace chambers. And there's 25 people here. And I've had this vision of building one. And so I went and saw Joseph during the break and told him what was going on. And came back for the group, and he announces Jeff's going to build a Kiva, a peace chamber. Yeah. So me being how I am, Capricorn in particular, I figured I got to do it. So it ended up here in my backyard. And a whole bunch of people came and helped build it, and there's a photo album out there on the table of the construction. Yeah, so it's part of a network of, I've given up even trying to keep count, but over 30, some people say 50 chambers. Some of them have been built and kind of decommissioned for one reason, property is sold or something. So we're part of that network, and we're all going to go down and meet up with the big family in Sundance over Memorial Day weekend down outside of Pagosa Springs. And anybody familiar with Sundance? With that? Basically 3 days, no food, no water, and dancing to the beat of a big drum. And so anyways, Kiva got built like a magnet. All these people started showing up. I was working on the road, you know, and so that, and we commemorated it in 1990. So
the day before my birthday.
Yeah, January 7th. Yeah, and so I think we're all gathered here. What was I counting? 8 people. And so let's just go around, introduce ourselves, and just say a couple sentences about, you know, sort of what spiritual path you're working, if any, as if life wasn't sufficient. You know, so I'll start with you, John.
Sure. My name's John Roberts. I've went to school in Boulder in the 80s and moved back in 2010, living Chief Niwat's prophecy. And I live in Sunshine Canyon over the hill. I hold a monthly drum circle, and I don't know very much, and I'm on the quest to learn some more.
My name is Julie, and I've lived in Colorado since 1969, but moved up into the mountains about in 96, so that's about 20 years ago, something like that. And I love coming to ceremony at Jeff's house, and so I'm just here to keep learning and being.
Well, Julie's also a Vipassana meditator, and I have a Buddhist teacher. She's been out to the center and meditated with him and does retreats also.
Yeah, I'd say probably like the meditation style I use is Svantaji's.
Yeah.
My name's Adam Felberg. It's my first time here. I've done some Lakota sweats and some Weecha sweats. Benefited some from the Weecha work. It looks like I'll be here for the summer. I work as a gardener. I did review.
voice is very didgeridoo.
It's true.
It really has a lot to do with it.
Bring it next time. We use it a little bit to, warm up in here before talking or anything. And, sacred headspace. Maybe we just don't sweat. We just
Too late for that.
Get caught up in the wave.
Hi everybody, my name's Alyssa. I've lived in Gold Hill for about 2.5 years, on this beautiful piece of heaven in particular for about 1.5 years. Huge privilege. I'm just finishing up with a 2-week Vipassana and Buddha family retreat. And so it feels like a perfect way to cleanse some of the energy and support in the integration. I feel like I've been really loving both the overlap and the differences between Vajrayana Buddhist path and the Red Road. And I feel like they really blend quite harmoniously together. And I also enjoy playing the harp and some other instruments and singing and being out in nature.
I'm called Stephen, and I didn't put my hearing aid today, so I haven't heard much of what you said. So I just want to say that in case you talk to me and I don't seem to acknowledge that it's not that, it's just that I don't hear very well. I've lived in too many places to mention, one of them being here in 74, time when Jeff and Larry were running the Prospector Cafe there at the corner, and Julie was our doctor, and I'm here now, very happy to be here, take part of the ceremony. Jeff said, as part of spiritual life, as if life was not enough, and for me it is, and so I go, where my life takes me, basically, and it's been good. Thank you, Jeff, for making this happen.
So my name is Eric. I didn't find myself until I was in my 40s on a spiritual path, and I was living in a community in Boulder. And since then, I've just been kind of seeking and exploring and trying different traditions, and I find myself here drawn to try a sweat lodge for the first time.
My name is Tanya. I've grown up all over. I was born in the US, but I've grown up in Germany, France, Canada, and I'm now here, and I've lived here for many years in Boulder. I'm on a quest to just unravel myself, discover myself, and also embrace the parts of me that I've forgotten about and maybe turned away from. As a mom, as a lover, as a partner, as a friend, all those parts.
Oh, well, thanks for that. And, Stephen mentioned I moved up here in 1974 to run the local cafe, and Stephen was a customer way back then. And, bought a house in 78 and put 5 additions on my house now, popped the top, dug a basement out under it, etc. And I'm a builder. I had the good fortune of being the erector of the Dushanbe Tea House. Me and my crew, everybody from up here at Gold Hill, built the Dushanbe Tea House with the Tajiks, of course. And I don't know, it's just been one story after another of being guided. And I think a lot of the reason I found myself guided is because I read Castaneda early on. And one of his suggestions that Don Juan gives to him is to find a power spot in nature and spend time there. And I was living on a hill in Boulder, and I just took to the Flatirons up there and started spending a lot of time just hanging out in nature. And I think one of the effects of doing that is my teacher, Joseph Real, who inspired this, says a true human is a listener. So that kind of opened up my, I don't know what you want to call it, spiritual ear. And I found myself guided, to come up here and be here and buy my house, etc., etc. There's a lot of stories I could tell. And so, today I was going to talk about the 5 attributes of warriorship in the Toltec tradition. And that actually comes out of a Castaneda book called The Fire from Within. I don't know if people read Castaneda, but it was kind of like the 5th book was kind of just like real confusing. And then the 6th book, The Eagle's Gift, suddenly Carlos wakes up to a whole bunch of teachings that he'd been taught in, an altered state of consciousness. And those teachings are basically Toltec teachings. And he finds out that Don Juan is the heir of a lineage going back in time. And, that predates the Spanish conquest and goes back to Toltec times. And and he found that his lineage, etc., had to make some adjustments to the original teachings because in Buddhism, the Buddha differentiated between what he called the path of power and the path of purification. And the Toltec ancient tradition is a path of power. And that's working with spiritual entities and having spiritual powers. Whereas the path of purification is enlightenment. And basically, as Harley Swiftier put it, we keep going around till we get it right, then we go back to the source. So the idea in path of purification is getting back to the source, which the Buddha was called total enlightenment, which the Buddha achieved. So there's an interesting blend there of views. The Buddhist view gives a whole, how would I say it, sort of philosophical structure explaining the path of power, as in a whole series of trance states, etc. And so, basically, what I like about the Toltec teachings is they're modern. They're applicable to today's world. Whereas the Buddha, was teaching 2,500 years ago. I think the vocabulary was like, 5,000 words. And people were mostly farmers and living in little villages. And the cities were, a couple thousand people. So the Toltec teachings are, applicable to, in my opinion, to modern times. Particularly, with the complexity and at all levels, mental, emotional, physical, and environmental that we've got going on. So that's why I like these teachings. And these 5 attributes of warriorship are simply the following. First one's control over ourselves. Okay. Second one is discipline, which could be said to be the sustained application of control. And the third one is called forbearance. That is basically allowing the practice to open us up and to find ourselves guided, to step out of conditioning. Typically, we're all conditioned to, live a middle-class life. Go to college, get married, have kids, buy a house, etc. So You know, if we can step out of that conditioning, who knows what happens, you know, where we go. In my case, I ended up here. In my case, you know, I met a wonderful woman that is in meditation retreat, and we've been living together for 6 years. And I feel so blessed. So, you know, if you step out, what I do is I call it unplugging. And radical unplugging is like Sundance or, you know, silent meditation retreats of one form or another, and various things like that, vision questing in Native American tradition. Once you start doing that, then, you know, you find yourself guided. It's the forbearance. And then there's timing. So that's the fourth one. And then the fifth one is will. Okay. So what I've got here is I've got a handout I'm going to give everybody. And what it is, it's essentially a mindfulness practice, a 24/7 mindfulness practice. I like it. Some of these meditators say, oh, I set my watch to beep every hour and make sure I'm being mindful. No, this is 24/7. And the practice is very simple. You say, am I conscious? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's the body doing? They call it the movement function in this. They don't even talk about the body. It's basically the movement function. And what are the senses picking up on in an environment? And could simply be said that our world is totally mental, emotional, and that basically, you know, being aware of moving and of the environment is, you know, for primitive people, quote unquote, you know, and because we're so modern and complex and involved in all our stories, etc., we've forgotten about movement and being in touch with the senses, our environment, and look where we're at. So I'll hand this out. You guys can look at it. It's from a book called The Fourth Way, and it's the teachings of G.I. Gurdjieff. It was recorded by a guy named Uspensky. And back in the hippie days, when I was in college, this book was in vogue. You know, I can remember going to, you know, little craft fairs and looking over, and some gal that was tending the booth was reading this, you know, and stuff like that, you know. So, and Castaneda was also in vogue. So I just bring that to your attention. I'm going to tell you a little story here that's kind of fun here. You know, you can kind of ask yourself, well, how does timing and will, you know, these are kind of how does that work? Okay, you know, well, you got to do the first three to find out for yourself. But this little story is kind of interesting. So I don't know how many years ago this was. I think it's maybe 15 or so. I was going to town to do my errands, right? You know, so I had my little list of errands, and I looked at it and said, oh, if I do this first, etc., I got a circular pattern, you know, so, you know, that seemed the logical way of doing things. And my little voice says, because the little voice becomes operational after forbearance there, said, no, do that last. And what it was is I had a whole bunch of books I was taking to this bookstore to, you know, to give to them, basically. And so I said, okay, I'll do that last. So I go to the bookstore, and I got a whole bunch of hardbacks and stuff. And the guy says, no, we can't use those. You need to take it to this book recycling place, and starts giving me the address. And I go, oh, shucks, it's Saturday afternoon. They won't be open. And, you know, it sounds a little esoteric finding the place. And this was before I could, you know, press a button on my cell phone and say, where is this place? And, you know, so I had my books in a shopping cart. And so I start rolling back towards my car. And this guy is getting out of a van. He looks over and he says, "Oh, well, there's a bunch of books they didn't want." And I say, "Yeah." He says, "I'm going to the recycle place this week. I'll take them." So he took the books, you know. So how's that possible? I mean, how is that possible? You know.
Being in flow.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so that's the way timing and will, you know, can come together like that. You know, I was absolutely amazed. And all I could say was, "Well, thank you, Great Spirit, for your guidance." And but anyways, things like that start happening. You know, another saying that I like a lot, Native American, is we want to live in harmony and balance with all our relations to experience the beauty and magic of the world. And people ask, "Well, what's the magic? You know, what's the magic? Is it like making things appear out of nowhere or something, you know?" But the magic is coincidence. You know, so when we get in tune and start paying attention, you know, to, you might call it our intuition, then things happen. Just, you know, interesting coincidences. You know, the reason I have this house is because of an amazing coincidence. And also, the reason I'm in Gold Hill is similar. And I don't want to carry on too long because we do want to get in the sweat lodge before the fire burns down. And what do we got? We got 3 women and 5 guys. So can the women change in your quarters downstairs?
Yeah, that's totally okay. Do we want to give people the handout before we?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, pass that around. This handout is titled the Fourth Way Cliff Notes. I had a woman come up and do a weekend retreat here, and I suggested she read the book, The Fourth Way. And
so the community I was living in was Fourth Way.
Really? Yeah.
I'm curious, like, you probably know the history of Boulder and some of the communities and stuff around, and whether or not you know about this community.
Maybe I don't. The Van Rennens were Fourth Way people who were present back in, when I was going to college. That'd be the early 70s.
So this was Yo and the ultra running group.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I heard that. Yeah. I didn't realize it was Fourth Way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a mix of stuff, and we would refer to Gurdjieff a lot. So.
Oh yeah, Gurdjieff was amazing character.
Yeah.
Did you read his books?
So I've read the.
Did you read Meetings with Remarkable Men?
Yes, I've read that one, and then like Uspensky's.
In Search of the Miraculous.
That one I read. That one's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. There's some just amazing stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gurdjieff was back in a time, you know, where I like the one where they went out in the desert and got on those tall stilts for the sandstorms.
Okay.
So they were above the sandstorm.
Huh.
And then somehow they got some local guy who took them to some dig, and they went down underground into temples and things that were 100 or so feet below the ground and covered by the sands. It sounded like they were out in the Gobi Desert or something.
Yeah.
And, and then he talks about in Meetings with Remarkable Men, who he's in coffee shop there. Someone, and he's like in Hojan, as I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where all the painted stuff in the tea house comes from. It's
Oh, yeah.
Hojan. And he's in a coffee shop there, and some older man comes in and sits down, and they get talking, and the older man looks at him and says, "Hey, Gogol, we've been looking for you." And Gogol was his childhood nickname. The old man had no way of knowing that. And he took him up into the Himalayas to what I'm pretty sure is the Great White Brotherhood. And, he describes those experiences there, and he's with remarkable men.
Yeah.
And he received these teachings. Yeah. But for me, the book's a lot more complex than this. All I'm after is the exercise of self-remembering. Just constantly saying, "Oh, am I present? What am I thinking?" Because our society is generally totally lost in thought and emotions. We are, and our emotions are dictated by our thoughts, by our storylines. We don't know feeling. Like, the feeling of the light, the feeling in someone's voice, feeling of nature, of the birds, etc. We don't live in feeling. We live in emotions. Anyways, enough. As my teacher says, once I get talking, I can talk a long time. That's Pate G. So the men get to change out here because we're the larger number, and the women down in Alyssa's space.
The men you get to change out here, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Not the women, okay.
Yeah, normally it's the women, but today the men outnumber the women. So.
And if we're already changed, we can just wait outside.
That would be a good plan. And, let's see, we're gonna need a fire tender. Somewhere you carry rocks in. You shaking your head?
Yeah.
You want that job?
I'm down.
Good job. Bring out a bathrobe you can throw on, and that'll shield you. And you need gloves, and you got a hat. Yeah, first round's mighty tricky. And Adam, why don't you help him? Typically we need a little pine bough to sweep the rocks with to get the dust and
sweeping and
off
blowing
of.
them off, it's important because otherwise it gets pretty sooty.
And you can also blow on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then when we pour water down, she says it gets up in the air. So you two guys will go in. You'll be going in last, and sitting to the left of the door.
And Jeff, I was gifted herbs from the retreat, and I'm curious if I can bring them in and sprinkle them on during one of the rounds.
Sure. Other than that, are there any questions? Sweat Lodge protocols? I guess I'll run by you real quick. You have an opportunity to pray. Typically, start your prayer out with Creator or whatever Great Spirit. And then end your prayer with "for all my relations." And also, when you go in the Sweat Lodge, you're on all fours, and you put your head to the ground and say, "for all my relations." And in that moment, you let your ego go away and remember four-leggeds that live in according to natural law. So that's what we want to get back to. We want to get back to our original nature. Somehow got a lot of barnacles on us. So you might say this is a barnacle clearing operation. Now we're going into dry dock. I can't imagine how they do that with ship. How do they bring the ship in and get up in the air and get down, clean underneath it? Some of the stuff the modern world's capable of just blows my mind.
And for the new people, the reason why we like it dark in there is because it's almost like a metaphorical womb that we get to return into and come out rebirthed, hopefully a little bit more connected with that original nature. So you can use that metaphor if it works for you. If not, you can throw it out the window.
Wow. Metaphors are good. Oh. And, any other questions? No? No? Let's do it. I gotta go in the house. Change. Oh. And John?
Yeah.
You need to grab the bucket and come into the kitchen sink and fill it up with our filtered water. And
Oh, yeah, I
grab
forgot to do that.
the MIT mug. Probably during the windstorm.
That was pretty intense.
Yeah, we blew the hatch off.
The previous one had blown the top off my wood stove
Yeah.
thing.
Please.
And the second one, after Dan fixed it, the second windstorm, which was like, I don't know, even maybe bigger than the first, but managed to stay on.
Well, so you're part of that group. That must have been interesting.
So many stories, but it's like set me on a path of. I mean, before I was kind of atheist, and now my thoughts are much different on stuff.
Uh-huh.
They had a
Were you a runner also?
That's why I got in there. I was an ultra runner.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh jeez. Yeah. There's a couple people living up here that were
Part of that group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not part of that group, but they're ultra runners.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.